I'm going to show you my complete blood work, full disclosure, and not just the latest that's optimized, no posturing. I'm going to show you the worst blood work of my life from 4 years ago, and then the whole road to improvement. I cut cholesterol in half, ApoB in half, triglycerides 3 times down. I'm going to show you everything I did and the whole strategy. Basically, 2021, we had a pretty rough family health crisis. Some of the subscribers that have been with us longer know about this. So my mother had cancer. She was in pretty bad shape. She almost passed away a number of times. I moved back from the US to try to help out with the situation here. And it was just a brutal year, just violent on the body, mind, spirit, sleep deprivation, forget time to work out or think about healthy meals. I mean, it was just brutal. And when that phase was over, and she made it, she beat cancer, she's still with us, fighting every day, but going strong. And so when that worst, most intense phase was over, she was no longer in immediate life risk. And we kind of lifted our heads from that haze of the chaos of that year. And I was broken. I was super overweight. I put on 30 or 40 pounds of fat that year, lost muscle, exhausted, felt aged. I felt like I aged 10 years in that year. I was even in a mild depression, which has never happened to me. I'm the least depressive person you'll ever meet, but by virtue of the whole situation. And so I got some blood work at the time, and I was horrified. My triglycerides were over 200. I had never had triglycerides that high in my life. My LDL cholesterol was high. I hadn't had high LDL in like 15 years. Fasting glucose was not bad, 92. Hemoglobin A1C was 5.1, so that's still normal, that's fine. What probably happened was I was insulin resistant because of the excess fat, but the glucose was still fine. That takes longer to go south, so that's pretty common. So this was early 2022 after that year of horrors of 2021. This is the before picture. I knew I had my work cut out for me. Now, I try to have an attitude towards most things in life of don't panic, take action. If you don't like the way things are, change it, work on it, and try to improve it. I knew I had to lose a lot of weight. That's obvious. Don't need blood work for that. First 6 months, 6 to 8 months were pretty straightforward. Just going back to normal life. Sleeping normally. Eating a healthy diet. No fat diets, nothing extreme. Exercising regularly. Again, not running marathons, but just going to the gym, going back to 3-4 workouts a week. Just that, I lost most of the weight in 6 to 8 months, probably, 60 or 70% of the weight. Got some blood work at that phase, just with going back to basic lifestyle habits. Triglycerides came down 40 points. This always happens with weight loss, but still long way to go. LDL, though, wasn't any better. And this sometimes happens with weight loss. There's a transition period, but I knew I just had to keep going. And I'm going through all this because we all have these tough periods, right? For some people, it's going to be a divorce or losing a job or somebody dies or having kids. A lot of people say, well, I had kids and it was chaos. I didn't have time for anything and I got really out of shape. That's your before picture. Don't ever apologize to anyone for your before picture. Don't ever apologize for working on stuff. I mean, things come up in life and we go and we handle it. And then we come back and we keep working on it. It's your own, I don't want to use the J word, the journey, but it's your own project, right? Nobody knows what's going on in your life. Don't worry about that. Just do what you got to do. So kept going with the healthy habits. Another few months, actually close to a year, late 2023, a bunch more weight loss, got new blood work. My triglycerides had dropped another 40 points. That's expected with weight loss. I'm 80 points down from where I started. Still not where I want to be, but we got to celebrate our progress, right? Got to celebrate the little victories. LDL was now a little better. Back in the quote-unquote normal range, not where I want it by any stretch, but in the right direction. Normally, my LDL cholesterol with lifestyle dialed in and a kind of stable phase is in the 70s or 80s. That's how low I can get it just with lifestyle. There are some metrics that are more reliable for risk of heart disease than LDL cholesterol. ApoB is one of them. My ApoB was 106 at this point. This is still too high. We want it at least under 90 for a healthy individual, and as we'll see in a second, I want mine even lower. So things are improving, but long road ahead. I also measured glucose again at this point. I don't get every possible value every time that I get blood work. Sometimes you just want to get a general view, and you know that you still have work to do and, that you're not there yet. But glucose was 77 at this point. That's about my normal, somewhere in the 70s, maybe low 80s. I also got some more blood work this time. I wanted to look at my insulin resistance more closely. So my fasting insulin was 6.9, and I calculate insulin resistance using two different indices, HOMA-IR and this thing called the TYG index. We got a whole video going over that, how to do it, but it's pretty straightforward. There are calculators online that you can use. And so at this time, HOMA-IR was 1.3, and there's some uncertainty with HOMA-IR. There are no firmly established thresholds. So some sources say up to 1.4 is normal, and then more than 1.9 is early insulin resistance. Other sources suggest that optimal HOMA-IR is under 1, and the TYG was 4.59, which is also higher than optimal. So I knew I had more work to do. I knew that before the blood work, to be honest. Now, around this time, there was a new development. I started measuring my LPA and found out that that's very high, runs very high in my family. So it was 178, and this is in nanomole per liter, and normal is under 75. So it's quite high. Now, if you've never heard of LPA, no worries, you're in the right place. We have a whole video going over everything about LPA. Basically, it's this subtype of ApoB lipoprotein that also causes heart disease, raises risk of heart disease. It's mainly genetically determined. So if yours is very high, you're probably not going to normalize it just with lifestyle. And it runs in the family, so it's good to measure family members as well. And it's surprisingly common, even though LPA is not a mainstream name. Even a lot of doctors haven't heard about it, unless they're cardiologists, of course. But high LPA is very common. Between 1 in 5 and 1 in 3 people have elevated LPA. And so because we can't normalize LPA with lifestyle, and there are no tools for LPA specifically, yet there's a number that are being studied, they're being developed. But right now, all we can do is control everything else. So ApoB, glucose, body weight, blood pressure, all the other risk factors, get them really nice and controlled so that you minimize overall risk of heart disease. Also at this time, because I found out about this LPA, I got a number of imaging studies to kind of get a general picture of my overall risk of heart disease or heart attacks in the future. So my calcium score was 0. That's good to know. It's better than if it's high. It's not a huge reassurance because the norm in relatively young people, 30s or 40s, is to have a 0 calcium score. Even in Westerners, which die of heart disease more than anything else. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in humans, actually. So a calcium score of 0 is good to rule out a red alert, but it's not a get out of jail free card. So I got another test that's a bit more specific, looks at soft plaque, and that's a carotid ultrasound. And that showed essentially that there was no detectable plaque yet, although the thickness of the layers of the artery wall where the plaque is normally found was a little above the average for my age. Possibly means that there's a susceptibility there, even though I don't have established plaque yet, that maybe there's a fertile soil there for plaque to grow in the future, possibly because of the high LPA. And so another reason, it's not panic time, but another reason to strategize, think about it in terms of long-term safety. Oh, and last thing to point out real quick is there is a kidney disease that is also genetically determined that runs in my family, polycystic kidney, and that is also a risk factor for heart disease later in life. So because of all of this, it's not an emergency, but there are a few things there that I should plan for and design a strategy to ensure myself in the long run. So like we said, ApoB for a healthy individual with no risk factors, no cause for concern, under 90 is a good rule of thumb. In my case, because I have the LPA, I have this kidney thing, I want it at least under 70. I want it a little stricter to reduce my risk further. And I can't get it there just with lifestyle. I know that when I have everything dialed in, my ApoB is maybe 80s, low 90s. So I talked to a number of cardiologists and lipidologists and my nephrologist, and I decided to try a lipid-lowering agent. And I wanted to start with a low-potency statin just to see the results and see how I did with it. And statins, honestly, are a topic where you go on social media looking for information, and there's so much misinformation, so much trash. People just turning on cameras and saying absurdities without looking anything up, without any knowledge. It's mayhem. And I'm not going to make a life and death decision based on what an influencer is yelling on TikTok with his shirt off. I mean, I don't care. I'm going for the strongest, most reliable information we have. And so I went over dozens and dozens of randomized trials, analyses of side effects, everything. I studied this pretty in depth, and I continue to do that. And I decided to start with a statin called simvastatin, which is a lower potency statin. It was one of the first ones to be developed. And we have evidence that it reduces risk of events like heart attacks, reduces all-cause mortality, but it's very benign on glucose metabolism. So one concern with statins is raising glucose levels. And we have a number of analyses looking at simvastatin, and it doesn't seem to do much to glucose. So I decided to start with that and see what happens. So I started with simvastatin, 10 milligrams a day, did that for about 3 months, and got new blood work. Triglycerides had dropped another 20 points. This is expected, both because I continued to work on fitness and also because the statin helps a little bit. It lowers triglycerides a bit. LDL was now 86, ApoB 85. So the statin had a little bit of an effect, not huge. This is expected because the simvastatin is a pretty weak statin, and I'm taking a low dose. And LPA actually went up to 221. And we'll come back to this because this is a really interesting point. As far as side effects, so the most commonly reported is muscle pains, and I felt nothing. Like for me, it didn't have that effect at all. And I go to the gym and I lift weights till I can't anymore, 2, 3, 4 times a week, and zero change. I mean, it was like I had a glass of water or something. Just had no effect on muscle pains. So this is really case by case. We have viewers who have a lot of statin intolerance, experience a lot of muscle pains. We have other viewers who have been on statins for years and have no side effects. So it's very individual, and I happen to be in the group that doesn't experience muscle pain. Another concern is cognitive function. Some people worry that reducing cholesterol production with a statin causes dementia. So I went over all the studies we have. The longest studies on this actually indicate, if anything, a link between statins and lower risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. But there are individual cases where people report they start a statin and they experience forgetfulness or brain fog, or they get kind of hazy. And sometimes they say, I stopped the statin and it goes away. So I think it's possible in specific people with susceptibility. So I tried it. I experienced none of that. And this was kind of my approach to the whole thing, is like, well, I'll try it. If it's me, I'll deal with it. I'll change the plan. If it's not me, great. And I also measured glucose levels because statins can have an effect there. So for me, it's just measure things and look and see what happens. So my glucose was 74. So same ballpark as before, no increase. Fasting insulin was 7.3. It was 6.9 before. Not sure if this is just variation between tests or if it's a small increase. Insulin resistance was similar. So HOMA IR 1.3, TYG 4.49. No change. Bottom line, the simvastatin seems to have pushed my lipids down a little, not a ton. And as far as glucose metabolism, most values seem unchanged. And this matches what we know in the literature, the average for everyone. So my ApoB is not on target yet. I talked again to cardiologists, etc. And we decided to try a stronger statin and see how I do on it. So I started atorvastatin, 20 milligrams. Atorvastatin is significantly stronger than Simva, and did that for a couple months. Lipids improved significantly. LDL now 61, ApoB 66. So now I'm on target. Triglycerides 89. LPA went up a bit more still, 228. And the atorvastatin did worsen my insulin resistance. So my fasting insulin now was 9.9. HOMA IR went up to 2. TYG 4.44. Glucose was about the same, 80. Hemoglobin A1C 5.2. So this is not good enough for me. I wanted to try something else. I don't want the impact on the insulin resistance. And I'm being picky, demanding here, perfectionist, because I'm designing a long-term strategy. This is potentially for life, for whatever, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So I want to find something that's as close to perfect as possible. So before we go on to the next step where I tried to fix some of these things, let's just touch real quick on this question of the statins increasing LPA. We see this in a number of studies, and it happened for me. So with the simvastatin, for example, the LPA went up significantly. It went up about 24%. So this sounds strange to a lot of people. I'm taking a drug because I have high LPA and the drug raises my LPA. It just seems like a no-brainer, just stop taking it. But remember, the goal here is not to lower LPA. It's not even to lower ApoB per se. It's to lower the risk of heart disease in general. And LPA is a very small fraction of ApoB lipoproteins. So if the LPA goes up and ApoB as a whole comes down, the net effect, the risk, might be coming down. In fact, I estimated my risk with one of the better calculators out there. I'll link this in the description. It's free to use. You guys can play around with it. And I like it because it accounts for lipids. It also accounts for body weight and even LPA. And it looks not just at short-term or medium-term risk of 10 years. A lot of calculators just do that. But this one looks at long-term risk. So risk of having a heart attack or a stroke all the way up to the age of 80. So here's my starting risk, 2022, overweight, high cholesterol, high LPA, 26% estimated chance of having a heart attack or a stroke until I'm 80, if I keep things that way. So that's worse than 1 in 4. It's not good. Just 2 years later, a lot of weight lost, lipids improve, and remember, LPA went up by 24%, but the risk came down 5%, right? Because of overall. Another couple months, now the cholesterol and the ApoB were significantly lower because the atorvastatin is more potent. LPA went up a little bit from 221 to 228, but the risk came down another 4 points, another 4% because of overall changes. Make sense? Okay, so next phase, I switched again to a rosuvastatin, which is another class of statins, and it's also a more potent one, kind of up there with atorva. And I went for 10 milligrams, did that for a number of months, and got blood work again. Maybe this sounds like it's a lot of work, all these phases. It really isn't. You basically decide on a strategy, you forget about it, you go live your life. You're doing that in the background, and months later you get blood work, you look at it, and you reassess. And this goes on over a year or 2 or 3, so this is really no work at all. And again, I'm designing a strategy for life to lower the risk of heart disease, which is the #1 cause of death. So I've never done so little work for so much payoff. In fact, I think it's an incredible privilege that I have to have access to all these tools and all this knowledge that other people generated. And I get to just benefit from this, to learn all this and to apply this to my own health. I can't believe how lucky I am. That's my take on it. So about 4 months on Rosuva, 10 milligrams. Lipids were good. LDL 58, ApoB 65, on target, triglycerides 90. So this is very similar to the atorvastatin. The insulin resistance improved. So the fasting insulin was now 7.2, the HOMA-IR 1.3, the TYG 4.44, fasting glucose 75, A1C 5.1. Basically, the atorvastatin raised my insulin resistance, but the rosuvastatin didn't. It kind of brought it back to baseline. Oh, and by the way, in some people, a statin can cause liver enzymes to go up. So I measured those, the standard AST, ALT, and those are always normal for me. It was never an issue. So far so good with this rosuvastatin. Lipids look good, no increase in insulin resistance. But I went and got another blood test because I'm a pesky little digger like that. And I measured CK, which is creatine kinase, which is a readout that when elevated can signal muscle damage. And normal for my lab is under 200. Mine is usually 100, give or take. And on the rosuvastatin, it doubled. It went to 200, a little over 200, 214. So I wasn't completely comfortable with that. I wanted to find something else that doesn't raise my CK, gives me all the other results, but without this trade-off. By the way, just to give you guys a little bit of context, every one of these steps that you're seeing me optimize, it wasn't my cardiologists pushing me to. A lot of these issues, the insulin resistance going up, the CK going up, they weren't worried about it. They thought it was fine. They thought the effect on the lipids was fine, and they thought this was a valid scheme. But every time I wanted to perfect more, I wanted to fine-tune for 2 reasons mainly. One is that I'm doing this for very long-term strategy. 2 is that it's not an emergency for me. I have the luxury of having time to do this, right? Because I don't have massively high risk. If I had had a heart attack last week and I was trying to find something, I'm not playing these games. I'm slamming my ApoB to 50 or 40, and I'm not tweaking CKs and insulin resistance going up a point or 2, because there it's an emergency, right? It's completely different context. But here I'm designing something for the long run, so I have the luxury of trying to find something that's as close to perfect as possible. Another thing that's kind of funny is a lot of times I would walk into these offices where I go to get these imaging tests, and a lot of these doctors would do a double take when they were like, what are you doing here? Not that they were recognizing me. I didn't know a lot of these people before, but they are not used to seeing someone who looks younger and less sick and less broken than a lot of their patients. And I think this is a very sobering realization and kind of an indictment on how we think about this disease, because what we normally do as Westerners is we let it progress. This is a chronic disease that builds over the lifetime. And then when things are out of hand, when there's chest pain, when there's a heart attack, when things are haywire, then we look for help. But by then it's damage control, right? You have plaque that's been growing for 50 years. There's a lot less that you can do about it. The way you nail a chronic disease is you prevent it in the first place. So that's what I'm doing. I'm the weirdo there that looks younger and leaner and everything than a lot of the people in line. I don't care. I'm trying to prevent the problem in the first place so that I'm not there in that condition in 20 or 30 years. At least I did what I could. Okay, so next step, what we decided to do was, because this 10 milligrams of Rosuva are giving me the lipid results, but they're elevating my CK, we decided to cut the Rosuva in half. So go to 5 milligrams. A couple months of that, got blood work again, and it did fix the CK, came back down to normal, about 100, but the lipids went up too much. LDL cholesterol 90, ApoB 83, triglycerides 112, fasting insulin 6.3, HOMA 1.1, TYG 4.5, glucose 73, A1C 5.1. So the glucose metabolism is gradually improving. It's in the right direction. It's close to where I want it, but the 5 mg of Rosuva are not getting me to my ApoB target. So I got to the last phase here, and two things happened here. The first one is I decided to add another agent that is not a statin. I already know if I increase the Rosuva, it's going to increase the CK. I want to explore something else. So I left the 5 mg of Rosuva and I added another medication called Ezetimibe, 10 milligrams of that. And Ezetimibe is a really interesting drug because what it does is it inhibits cholesterol absorption from the gut. So your liver can basically get cholesterol 3 different ways. It can produce cholesterol itself, it can get it from the gut, or it can get it from the blood. So Ezetimibe inhibits the intestinal source, so the liver has to get more from the other 2 sources. It makes more and it gets more from the blood. And in the blood, it gets it from ApoB particles. So it's going to pull those from the blood. So ApoB is going to come down in the blood. That's the whole thing with these drugs. Statins, on the other hand, they inhibit the production. So the liver is going to get more cholesterol from the other sources, more from the intestine and more from the blood. And ApoB also comes down. When you have both of them at the same time, statins and Ezetimibe, now both of these sources are inhibited. And so the liver can only get it from the blood. So it gets a lot of ApoB out, and ApoB comes down the most. That's the logic behind combining these. And the second thing I did during this period is I continued to lose weight. And I had actually stalled. I had actually plateaued with the weight loss. I had lost most of the weight, but there was still that last stubborn fat roll. You know what that looks like? Yeah, that. And so I was eating a very healthy diet. There wasn't much room for improvement. But I was probably isocaloric, so I was eating as much as I was expending, and so I was kind of plateaued. All I did was cut back a little on the quantity. So I would serve a plate 10 or 20% less quantity. I would space out meals a bit more, snack less in between, wait a little longer to feel hungry. Just those super simple tricks. And I cut back probably a couple hundred calories a day, and I lost another probably 8 kilos of chub in the last 4 or 5 months. So that was pretty effective. So here are the current bloods just from this week, super recent, with this new regime: 5 milligrams Rosuva plus 10 milligrams Ezetimibe, LDL 50, ApoB 55, triglycerides 79, partly the statins, partly the weight loss. So this is all good. I mean, this combo with the statin and the Ezetimibe is dynamite. CK normal, so that's good. Fasting insulin 5.3, HOMA 1.1, TYG 4.41. So these are the best results so far. All the glucose metabolism is improving steadily, close to optimal, and I'm pretty close to where I want to be. I don't want to lose too much more weight. I'm at 82, 83 kilos now. I'm 6'1", that's 1.85 m for the metric folks. So I don't want to, there's not that much fat to lose more. Otherwise I'll look like a leukemia patient. Now it's just fine tuning and maybe get a little bit of muscle to fill out, get stacked. No, don't need a ton of muscle, but just a little bit more. That takes longer. And so now it's just fine tuning. And what's probably going to happen is the triglycerides and the fasting insulin are going to nudge a little further as I do the fine tuning, but they're pretty good. I'm not complaining. Now the glucose was 86 and A1C was 5.3. These are both in the normal range, but they're a little higher than what I usually see. So I definitely want to keep an eye on these going forward, see if this is just variation from one test to another, or if it's drifting up. It would be a little surprising because the insulin came down. So if the glucose goes up, it'd be a little weird. But hey, if that's legit, if it's drifting up, I'm just going to change it again and try to find something that gives me everything I got. Not really interested in compromising on anything major unless I absolutely have to. Oh, and C-reactive protein, this inflammatory marker, it was 0.05. That's like in their lowest risk range. And I always have that low, even back when I was overweight. So that's never a problem for me. And by the way, the LPA went back down to baseline. I didn't expect it, but it's a nice bonus. And here's the overall risk currently of having a heart attack or a stroke until I'm 80, 9.7%. So it's half of what it was just a year ago. And it's 3 times lower than it was when I started just a couple years ago. It was 1 in 4, now it's 1 in 10. That is not bad at all. And we'll see what else I can figure out going forward. And the bottom line is, I think I've made that clear. I'm not married to any one of these regimes. I'll change it, no problem. I'll drop the statins. If they don't work, I'll do something else. There's a lot of other things that I haven't tried yet. There's actually a class of statins called pitavastatin that is much less used. It's less potent, but studies are really interesting. They show, in some studies actually show an improvement of insulin resistance on that statin. So that's one possibility. Another is PCSK9 inhibitors, which are another class of medication that are not statins. They also lower ApoB. And they actually lower LPA a bit, maybe 10-20%. It's not going to bring my LPA to normal, but it's a possibility. There's some bureaucratic issues with the PCSK9 inhibitor. I don't have indication for it, but it's a possibility. It's something in the back of my mind. I'm talking to the team again next week. We're going to reassess with this new blood work. You're actually seeing it before they do. And we'll strategize again. For a lot more on the causes of heart disease, what actually causes this #1 killer of humans. We have a whole video on that. Check it out right here. I'll meet you in there.